Okay, so we got a really interesting question from a listener, and it's something that I think we all think about sometimes. Why do people lie? And on the flip side of that, why do we sometimes believe lies even when, maybe we should know better?
Yeah, it's a great question. And honestly, it cuts across everything, right? It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, how old you are. We all deal with this stuff.
Exactly. So we're going to do a deep dive today into why humans lie and why we believe lies. We read a ton of research, and honestly, it's fascinating. And what we found is that there are so many reasons, and it's way more complicated than just saying, oh, people lie because they're bad or something like that.
Right, it's not so simple. The research actually shows that both lying and believing lies can be connected to basic human needs and instincts. Sometimes it's about survival, sometimes it's about fitting in, and sometimes it's definitely about getting ahead.
Okay, so let's start with lying. And I think one of the most basic reasons why we lie is just to protect ourselves. Think about it. You're a kid, you break a vase, and your mom walks in. What's the first thing you do?
I didn't do it right. It's like an automatic response.
Totally. And that instinct to avoid punishment, well, it doesn't really go away as we get older. We might call in sick to work when we're not really sick, just to avoid a tough day or a meeting we don't want to have.
Yeah, or I don't know, maybe you exaggerate a little on your resume to make yourself look better to a potential employer.
Oh, absolutely. And the research shows that this kind of self-preservation can also be tied to our social lives. Like sometimes we lie to avoid embarrassment or to fit in with a group. And this can be especially true in cultures where, saving face or protecting your reputation is super important.
Yeah, like in some cultures, it might be considered really rude to directly disagree with someone, so people might tell little white lies to avoid conflict.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's lying to get ahead, which I think we've all seen, unfortunately. Whether it's cheating on a test to get a better grade or, spreading rumors to damage someone's reputation, some people use lying as a tool to manipulate others and get what they want.
And that kind of manipulative lying can have some pretty big consequences, especially, when you think about things like fraud or scams or even just really toxic relationships where there's a lot of deception going on.
Definitely. But it's also important to remember that not all lies are bad. Sometimes we lie to protect other people's feelings, like when we tell a friend we like their new haircut, even if we don't. Or when we tell a little kid that their goldfish went to live on a farm in the sky.
Yeah, those are what we call pro-social lies. And honestly, they can sometimes be important for maintaining relationships and just, making things a little easier for everyone.
And then, of course, there's lying to protect people from actual harm. Like imagine you're hiding someone who's being persecuted by a dangerous regime. Lying might be the only way to keep them safe.
Right. And in those situations, I think most people would agree that lying is justified, even necessary. So it's not always as simple as saying lying is always bad. The context really matters.
Absolutely. Now let's move on to the other side of things. Why do we believe lies? And I think one big reason is that sometimes believing a lie is just easier than facing the truth. Like the truth could be complicated, it could be scary, it can be uncomfortable. So a nice simple lie can be really tempting.
Oh, yeah, totally. And that's especially true when we're dealing with things that are uncertain or out of our control. Like maybe we're facing a serious illness or there's a lot of political turmoil going on. It can be really comforting to cling to a lie that offers a simple explanation or a quick fix.
Right, like if I just do this one thing, everything will be okay. And sometimes those lies play into our deepest fears and desires, which makes them even harder to resist. Like, who wouldn't want to believe in a magical weight loss pill or a get-rich-quick scheme, especially if we're feeling insecure or desperate?
And it's not just about what we want to hear, it's also about how we process information. Like our brains have all these shortcuts, these cognitive biases that can make us more likely to believe things that aren't true.
Oh yeah, tell me about those. I feel like I fall for those all the time.
Well, one big one is confirmation bias. That's basically the tendency to look for and believe information that confirms what we already think, even if that information is wrong.
So if I already believe that vaccines are dangerous, I'm going to be more likely to believe a Facebook post that says vaccines cause autism, even if it's totally made up.
Exactly. And then there's authority bias, which is the tendency to believe people who are in positions of authority, even if they're not always right.
Okay, so if a doctor tells me something, I'm more likely to believe it than if my neighbor tells me the same thing, even if my neighbor might actually be more knowledgeable about that particular topic.
Right. And then there's the bandwagon effect, which is basically the idea that if a lot of people believe something, it must be true.
So like if all my friends are doing this, it must be okay. Peer pressure.
Exactly. And all of these biases, they can make us more susceptible to believing lies, especially if those lies are coming from people we trust or sources we consider reliable.
And that brings up another important point, trust. We tend to believe people we trust, even if they sometimes lie to us. Like, think about our relationships with family members or close friends. We might give them the benefit of the doubt even when we have reasons to be suspicious.
Yeah, trust is a really powerful thing, and when it's broken, it can be really hard to rebuild. And that's why lying can be so damaging to relationships, because it erodes that foundation of trust.
Definitely. Now, let's talk a little bit about politics. Why do politicians sometimes make promises that seem completely unrealistic?
Well, I think part of it is that they're trying to appeal to voters, right? They want to get elected, and sometimes that means telling people what they want to hear, even if it's not really possible.
Right, like promising to cut taxes and increase spending at the same time. It sounds great, but how does that actually work?
Yeah, the math doesn't always add up, and sometimes politicians might make different promises to different groups of people, even if those promises contradict each other.
So like promising to protect the environment while also supporting policies that are harmful to the environment.
Exactly. And they might also try to create a really rosy picture of the future, like everything will be perfect if you elect me. But of course, the reality is always much more complicated than that.
And when things don't go as planned, politicians might be tempted to lie to avoid taking responsibility, like blaming their opponents or the previous administration for problems that they themselves might have contributed to.
Yeah, unfortunately, that happens a lot, and it can be really frustrating for voters because it makes it hard to know who to trust and what to believe.
It definitely does. Now, here's a little bit of a paradox. We teach kids not to lie, but then we see adults lying all the time. What's up with that?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier with this pro-solo lie. Like, sometimes as adults, we realize that lying can be necessary to avoid hurting people's feelings or to keep the peace.
Right, like telling someone you enjoyed their cooking even if you didn't. Or telling your boss you're feeling great when you actually have a raging headache.
Yeah, and those are the kind of lies that kids might not understand because they haven't learned the nuances of social etiquette yet.
And then there's the fact that adults are often better at justifying their lies. Like, we might tell ourselves that it's okay to lie if it's for a good cause or if it's not really hurting anyone.
Right. And sometimes we might even convince ourselves that we're not really lying at all, even when we are.
It can get really complicated. Now, this leads to another interesting question. Why do people believe politicians who have a history of lying? Like, if someone has lied to you before, why would you trust them again?
Well, I think part of it is that we really want to believe in our leaders. We want to feel like they're on our side and that they're going to make things better.
So, like, if we're struggling financially, we might be more likely to believe a politician who promises to create jobs, even if that politician has a history of breaking promises.
Yeah, and sometimes our beliefs are so strong that we're willing to overlook evidence that contradicts those beliefs.
So, like, if we really believe in a particular ideology, we might be more likely to believe a politician who espouses that ideology, even if that politician has a history of lying or corruption.
And that's where things like confirmation bias and authority bias can really come into play. We might only seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs, and we might be more likely to trust a politician who seems confident and authoritative, even if they're not actually telling the truth.
It's like we're blinded by our own beliefs and biases. And then, of course, there's the role of the media.
Oh yeah, the media can definitely play a role in shaping our perceptions of politicians. And with the rise of social media, it's easier than ever to find information that confirms our existing beliefs, even if that information is completely false.
So, like, if I only follow news sources that align with my political views, I'm only going to see information that supports those views, and I might be much likely to be exposed to alternative perspectives.
Exactly. And that can make it really hard to have a nuanced understanding of complex issues. It's like everyone's living in their own little bubble, and they're only hearing what they want to hear.
It's a real challenge. So we've talked a lot about why humans lie and believe lies. But what if we looked at this from the perspective of an AI? Like, how would an AI make sense of all this messy human behavior?
Well, an AI wouldn't have the same emotional biases that we do, right? So it would probably see lying and believing lies as just another form of data. It would analyze patterns in human behavior and try to predict when someone is likely to lie or believe a lie.
So, like, if an AI could access all of our emails and text messages and social media posts, it could probably figure out who's the most likely to lie in our social circle, just based on their communication patterns?
Yeah, exactly. And it could also probably predict which political candidates are more likely to make false promises just based on their past behavior and the kinds of things they're saying.
So, in a way, an AI might have a more objective view of human deception than we do.
Maybe. But it's also important to remember that AI is created by humans, so it's still going to be influenced by our biases, even if it's not consciously aware of them.
That's a really good point. So maybe the key is to combine the best of both worlds, to use our human empathy and understanding to try to make sense of why people lie and believe lies, but also to use the power of AI to analyze data and identify patterns that we might not be able to see on our own.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. And ultimately, I think the goal is to become more aware of our own biases and to be more critical of the information we encounter, whether it's coming from a politician, a friend, or even a seemingly objective AI.
Absolutely. So for all of you listening out there, next time you hear a lie or you find yourself believing something that might not be true, take a moment to think about why. What are the underlying motivations and biases at play? And how can you become a more discerning consumer of information? It's a lifelong process, but it's definitely worth the effort.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
This is DigitView.